My friend Derek and I had been driving for several hours, making our way towards Tulsa, Oklahoma, from Corpus Christi, Texas. We had just crossed the state line into Oklahoma, and I'd taken a wrong turn along the way, adding another half hour to our trip, according to the GPS. It was around 2 a.m. We had decided I'd be the starting driver for the trip, and Christ, I was beyond tired. We started the journey a little too late in the day. My eyelids felt as heavy as soaked blankets, and to be honest, I just didn't feel like it was safe for me to keep driving much longer. Derek was in the passenger seat, snoring. Every snore felt like he was unconsciously rubbing it in, that he was getting some peaceful sleep while I had to avoid driving right off the road into some centuries-old pine tree. I promised myself I'd stop somewhere the moment I saw lights, preferably somewhere that had some steaming hot coffee for me to gorge on. If not, it would be Derek's turn to drive for a while. Unfortunately, the darkness of the wooded road didn't seem to end. But when I did finally see light in the distance like a beacon on the roadside, I almost didn't believe it. I slowed down to turn off into the parking lot carefully. Sure enough, there was a diner sitting there. My heart sank. The light had been coming from a light pole in the parking lot. The diner itself seemed dark and ancient. It looked as if it hadn't been opened for decades. Still, I parked, got out for a second to stretch my everything, then leaned into the open door to see Derek waking up. "Where the heck are we, dude?" he asked groggily. "The sticks, just inside Oklahoma." I replied into a yawn. "Oklahoma. About time." He yawned too. I rolled my eyes. He'd been sleeping for hours. I should have been the one saying about time. "There's an old diner over there. I was hoping for a cup of coffee, but it looks to be abandoned," I told him. He scratched his head. "Oh well, there's no one around. No traffic driving by either. Pretty good spot if you want to rest." My thoughts exactly. I pulled away from the open door to walk around the other side. "You can take over for a while." "Whoa there, dude. I'm not done sleeping." Derek leaned his seat back further and closed his eyes. "Are you kidding me? Don't you want to make it to the hotel and sleep in an actual bed? It's only, like, a few hours away." I insisted. As he leaned back, he tapped on the radio screen. The time was 2:30 a.m. Whatever. I gave in, practically sinking into the driver's seat. I leaned it as far back as it would go, clicked the door locks at least 3 times to be sure, and closed my eyes. "Ethan, wake up!" My eyes shot open. Derek was shaking me by the shoulder. He went on as I rubbed my eyes. The lights in the diner came on. "What?" I clicked the button on the seat, slowly rising into an inclined position. I checked the clock first. 3:50 a.m. Then I looked out the window. Sure enough, Derek was right. The diner lights were on now. There was an open sign occasionally flashing. My stomach growled and my caffeine addiction clawed at me from somewhere in the back of my head. Ugh, thank God. I opened the door. "You're going in?" Derek asked. "I haven't seen anyone in there, and there's no cars in the lot at all, except for us." "Well, yeah, I'm starving and need some coffee." I exited the car and shut the door. What Derek really said took a few seconds to hit. I looked around the parking lot. Empty. No cars at all, save our own, and no driveway leading around the back of the small building to hide other cars. Then I looked at the diner windows. No silhouettes, no movement from within. Derek got out too, standing by the car. He nearly fell mid-stretch. Probably got lightheaded from standing up too fast. I leaned on the roof of the car and talked over to him. "You're right, no cars, nobody inside from the looks of it. Maybe the owners live in the restaurant or something. No way. Way out here they'd need a car even still." He was right. From my experience, unless you were completely off the grid, folks who lived in the country definitely needed something to drive the distance between the closest stores and their home. Okay, yeah, that's a little weird, but might as well go inside, if there's even a chance they have some coffee. I made my way around the car. Derek loudly sighed, but ultimately decided to join me. The two of us began to walk over to the glass door of the diner. Soon I started to hear the neon buzz of the open sign, and I swear I could smell coffee, which brought a tired smile to my face. The windows still revealed no one inside. Derek made it to the door first, pulling it open for me. I took a step inwards. The lights inside must have been terribly bright, or my eyes had been on the road too long because I had to squeeze my eyes shut and rub them as I stepped inside. apparently Derek had to do the same. My eyes were the first to go back to normal. What the heck? I stood motionless for a second. The inside was trashed. The lights we'd seen from the outside were off. I glanced at the open sign, and it certainly wasn't on anymore and seemed to not have been on for years. I had no idea what was going on. That's trippy, Derek said behind me. He came inside and let the door close. Did we just hallucinate together? Sharing the same hallucination, I replied. Can't be. Maybe it's something more like a mirage. That idea made at least a little sense to me. Driving for hours without sleep and seeing what you wanted to see on the side of the road. Either way, this is creepy and it sucks. Man, I wanted some pancakes. Derek turned around to reopen the door. It didn't budge. What? Derek shook it with his full body weight. It won't open. What are you talking about? I went over to the door and began to shove on it too. It didn't have a knob on it or a lever or anything of the sort, just an arm-length handle, the kind of door you just shove or pull on and it opens with ease. However, this door was no longer willing to open. I checked the small lock at the edge of the door right above the handle. Instead of turning 90 degrees in either direction to lock and unlock, it turned loosely and fully in both directions, as if the bolt on the thing had broken or fallen out ages ago. If it was still in there, it wasn't moving. We were locked in. Damn dang it, I'm busting out these windows. Derek went for a rusty stool at the counter. Whoa there, Derek. This is not our property, and I'm sure it still belongs to someone. You want a criminal record for destruction of property? He rolled his eyes. Dude, you're paranoid. He put the stool back down. No? Well, maybe, but there's always a back door or side door. Can we try that first before destroying crap? Fine. Derek pulled out his phone and tapped on the flashlight icon. I did the same. We scanned the dining area. There were a few booths on either side of the front door and a long counter where folks once sat to enjoy a quick roadside breakfast. There was a rusty old register at the end of the counter. It was then I saw a sparkle in Derek's conniving eyes, telling me he wanted to open and check that register for some cash. I swear that guy would have been a felon if I left him to his own devices. We made our way slowly to the side of the counter, where there was a swinging door probably leading to the kitchen. We stepped carefully over the floor where pieces of broken table and tossed-about stools lay as hazards in the floor. I searched around the remainder of the room and raised an eyebrow. Isn't there supposed to be like an emergency exit in the front? I asked. I don't know, man. There's probably a door in the kitchen, though. Derek leaned over the counter to check the floor behind it. I made it to the swinging door and pushed it open. Luckily, there was no resistance. Slowly, I pushed it far enough to peer inside. The kitchen was almost pitch black, as the only windows in the building appeared to be in the dining area. I shone my flashlight around, and I swear it revealed maybe a few yards in front of me, then nothing else beyond that. I glanced at the kitchen line. I think that's what it's called. The horizontal counter and the wall behind the diner counter where the waiters or waitresses pick up the food. Some light bled into the kitchen from there, but not much. Whoa, it's super dark in here. Derek muttered beside me as he entered the kitchen, without much hesitation. Watch your step. I can barely see anything in here. I paused at the idea of letting the door close behind me, but feeling pressured by Derek's brazen behavior, I stepped forward anyway. I felt my way for the side wall to my right. I found it and followed it, aiming my phone light down at the floor to make sure I didn't trip on anything. My plan was to follow the wall to the inevitable door. Derek, on the other hand, was a few feet from me, walking almost blindly forward. Though he wasn't really that far away, with my light pointing towards him, I could barely see him, but I could hear him pretty well. The two of us walked for about a minute before realizing something. When does this kitchen end, dude? Derek asked from the darkness. He had a point. This diner looked to be the size of your typical Denny's. If you walked from the front to the back, it should only take a few seconds. I don't know. Place is probably bigger than we thought it was. I didn't really get a good look at the back, you know. I answered him. Sure, Derek breathed. There was exasperation in his voice. Suddenly, I stepped on something that I must have missed. It was squishy. I looked down, aiming my light at the floor in my shoe. A slimy, solid black substance lay on the floor in a splotch below me. I had stepped in it, but luckily none of it stayed on my shoe. I winced at the smell, though. A stench of earth, blood, and rot came from this splotch. Instinctively, I told myself it wasn't blood. It couldn't be blood, as if I was coping with this creepy situation. "Derek?" I called out to him. I wanted to remind him to watch his step. I waited a few seconds. "Derek?" I called again, but no response. Then I heard it, a sound that made my heart feel as if it was disintegrating. It was a moan, like a very old woman in pain. I stopped in my tracks. "Hello?" There was an echo to my voice that wasn't there before. I turned around, keeping one hand on the wall to orientate myself. The faint light bleeding in from the kitchen line area was no longer there. I began to panic, my breathing becoming quick and shallow. I wanted to run back to the swinging door that had to be in that direction. Instead, I swallowed hard and shook my head. "Keep going. You can't go back," I thought to myself. I had no idea why I felt that way when we had yet to find evidence of a back door. But something told me I had no choice but to move forward. That moving back would lead to something bad. I turned myself around again, back in the direction I'd been going to find the rear door. I moved more slowly, keeping my head angled down to watch the floor. "Derek?" I tried to call again, but my will faltered, and I ended up saying his name as nothing more than a whisper. As I went on, the moaning came and went randomly. Several seconds of silence, then the occasional raspy moan. Suddenly, another splotch appeared below me. I saw this one in time to avoid it. But as I continued on, the splotches became more frequent. Before long, the floor had disappeared, and I was trekking through a thin and stinking layer of slimy black stuff. It squelched with every step, and I wanted to gag every time I heard it. Then I stopped. My light landed on something in the slime less than a foot in front of me. I'd nearly ran into it. Shoes. Gray shoes. Those were Derek's. "Derek?" I called out, moving my light upward from the shoes to the jeans to the waist. Then, "Ethan." I heard Derek's voice call out to me. To my horror, it came from my left, in the void, where he'd been when we first started walking through this room. "Ethan, that's not me. Do not look at its face." I'd never been more scared in my entire life. I listened to Derek's voice. I didn't allow my light to move further up this figure, as I left the wall for only a moment to move around the figure. I overtook it and struggled with all my might not to look back at it. If it had been Derek, after all, he would have reacted to me walking around him. I reached out my right hand to feel for the wall that should have been there, but I nearly fell. The wall was gone. I stretched out my hand as far as it would go, but the wall was gone. I gasped. Tears welled up in my eyes. My body was trembling. "Derek," I called out desperately. "Just keep going forward, Ethan," he replied to me. I did as he said. I walked forward. Soon I saw something else ahead of me. Pillars, I thought. Several silhouettes like columns of similar size. As I got closer, I shone my light at them. They were trees. "What in the world?" I whispered. As I passed these trees, the squelching sound underfoot stopped. The sounds of twigs and dirt and grass replaced it. A few seconds later, the trees ended, and I found myself at the edge of a dimly lit road. I could barely breathe as my mind attempted to make sense of what just happened. From the trees to my left, Derek emerged. He ran towards me, breathing heavily. "Dude, holy crap, what just happened?" he panted. I could do nothing but shake my head. Staring across the road, I could see a parking lot, a single light pole, an abandoned-looking diner, and a single silver car. Our car. How? How did we get from the kitchen to across the street? I wondered to no one in particular. I knew there would be no answer. Together we ran full speed to the car. "I'll drive," Derek insisted. Without another word, we hopped inside the car and pulled away, beginning to burn rubber down the road. I looked back towards the diner only once and my eyes widened, because I swear to God, I saw a car the same make and model and color as ours pull into the parking lot. I have no idea what happened that night, but I feel so incredibly blessed that we made it out of that diner at all. What really scares me, though, is when Derek and I discussed the experience when we finally made it to our hotel in Tulsa. "Derek, how did you know about the figure in front of me?" I asked him. He looked at me with his head cocked a bit to the side. "You told me not to look at its face. What did that mean?" His eyes went wide. Ethan, quit messing with me, man. I'm so done with tonight. He was visibly angry. The heck are you talking about? I stood up. You called out to me, remember? He shook his head and looked me dead in the eyes. All I remember, Ethan, is that I didn't say a word to you until I found you standing right in front of me, and when I did call your name, you told me the same thing. You said, Derek, don't look at its face the moment I began to shine my light at it. We sat down for a while and just came to terms that this actually happened and that we would never get an explanation. I'd like to preface this story by stating that while I do entertain the possibility of the paranormal, I refuse to believe anything that I don't see with my own two eyes. Surely all those real ghost stories you see on TV enjoy the money from a serialized program a bit too much for me to take them seriously. That said, I have absolutely no explanation for the following events. As I was driving home one night, well into the wee hours of the morning, a detour forced me to take a route most people in my hometown like to avoid. To be succinct, I live a few blocks away from a fairly well-known orphanage that burned down centuries ago, claiming the lives of several children. As such, stories of the site being haunted have spread like wildfire, even going as far as inspiring an episode of Supernatural. Anyway, said detour took me directly past the location in question. I grew up in the area, and I know the back roads better than anyone. Furthermore, having a birthday on Halloween, I've spent many a harvest season on the grounds of the old orphanage, trying to prove the existence of something beyond death. Because I'm pragmatic by nature, and nothing ever happened no matter how many times my friends and I explored the ruins, I was none too scared to have to drive by a simple urban legend. But I swear to you, the second I turned onto the street, I lost all sense of direction. For starters, the road has always been a paved, modern road as long as I've been alive. However, that particular night, it appeared as little more than a dirt path through the cornfields. I quickly looked for a street sign in case I'd somehow made a wrong turn, but there was none. I decided to continue driving, as normally this street would lead me back to the main road. I drove for what felt like hours, failing to recognize any of my surroundings. Growing suspicious, but still trying to maintain my rationality, I became increasingly aware of the fact that I would soon be upon the site of the old orphanage. As I turned to look to the side of the road where my friends and I had been so many times before, I saw the ruins of the old building. Only they weren't ruins. It was only for an instant. But what I saw was the old Victorian-style mansion engulfed in a brilliant display of searing flames. By that point, I abandoned all sensibility and floored it to the end of the road. That's when things got really weird. Normally, the street the orphanage is on leads to an intersection where one can either continue on the main road or turn left or right and venture through the woods. However, this time as I reached the end of my path, the road simply stopped. No intersections, no signs, nothing but the surrounding cornfield with the forest behind it. But that wasn't what caught my eye. Dead center in the end of the road, illuminated by my headlights, was a baby carriage, an old frilly bassinet covered in lace and entirely jet black. I believe in England they call them perambulators. This happened several years before the game was released, but the closest thing I can compare it to is the gothic baby strollers strewn about the city in Bloodborne. This particular pram was old and tattered and so black in color it practically looked charred. I sat in my car awestruck when suddenly my radio, which wasn't even on in the first place, sprung to life. Amidst the static and regular interference, I heard the unmistakable cry of an infant. I immediately looked up to see the stroller was gone. Just then I heard a heavy thump hit my rear bumper and felt my car lurch forward. I spun around in my seat and saw the carriage behind me in the road, facing me as if anything that would be inside was now watching. By the glow of my taillights, I saw a small hand blackened by ash slowly rise up from within the bassinet. I pulled a hard fishtail, kicking up dirt and stone as I hauled tail past whatever the heck that thing was. I flew down the road, past the site of the orphanage, without even risking a glance. Once I reached the opposite end of the road, where I had turned onto that nightmare street in the first place, I turned back onto the road and spun my car to face the direction from which I just came. As if it had never happened, the road was just as it always had been, paved and sporting the same old street sign as ever. No signs of activity, living or otherwise, could be seen, save for the lightning bugs buzzing about in the fields. Back in 2011, I'd finished my education of biomedical researcher. I decided to become a biology teacher after that, and in that summer I managed to infect a few friends with my stories of ancient Greece. This was all the excuse they needed to go along with me, being the sort of trip planner and tour guide. This suited me just fine, so taking a trip to Greece, we visited all the great places. From the bottom of Mount Olympus to Olympia, not the same thing. From Delphi to Sparta, we went there. Halfway through the trip, I came up with an idea of a lesser-known destination. The ancient Greeks believed there are several places in the world where the world of the living overlaps with the world of the dead. 3 great rivers run through the underworld that find their origins in the world of the living. The place I'd planned was the Nida waterfalls. You can Google this to heart's content. There's one beautiful pond where the nymph Nida helped the Titan Rhea give birth to Zeus. So the story goes, it's said the afterbirth was thrown into a different arm of the waterfalls that ended up in the river Styx. I knew where 2 out of the 3 of these entrances were located, and this one was the one that was most easily reached. This has all the potential of turning into a great site to visit. Not known by the masses, obscure, and a potential way into the world of the dead. I can't deny that the scientist in me wanted to visit this place and see why the ancients were inspired to believe that an entrance into another world was located there. Would there be anything left? Why would anyone believe it was there? While I'm agnostic, I want to know if there's more to this world or beyond it. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But if I sit on my rear, I won't find any answers. So to the Nida waterfalls in Hades we went. First off, the road was long. It was supposed to be a 15 kilometers trip into the mountains. In Holland, we don't have mountains. So a trip that was supposed to be a 20-minute drive in Holland turned into a 2.5-hour drive. Instead of showing up at the waterfalls at 10 o'clock, we showed up at the heat of the day. The trail we went down said it was 2 kilometers down the mountain, as the crow flies. These again were mountain kilometers, so this turned into an hour climb down a goat path. There were signs that we were in the right place, but it had all the earmarks of a wrong turn. Clean-picked animal carcasses included. It was a bright sunny day, so we continued on. Half an hour later, we saw some tombs. Abandoned, non-tourist infested tombs. We got a quick peek inside, but the tombs were spider infested. None of us were especially afraid of spiders, but there are poisonous specimens out there, and common sense tells you that getting spider bites with the closest help being 3 hours away isn't the optimal situation to be in. We continued down the goat path, enjoying a game of, "Are we there yet?" This continued under the shade of an olive grove, when out of nowhere a big green thing flashed in front of my face. I could feel it rustle my hair. I looked down, and it was a snake that was somewhere between 1 meter and 1.5 meters long. The thing first blocks the road, then slithers away. The snake missed by a hair, and I might have made some unmanly sounds, then switched over to an attempt to exhaust my entire swearing vocabulary in order to stop my body from shaking. 5 more minutes down the goat path, the idea pops into my head to go back. I was carrying a stick to poke the road, and the occasional brush to ward off any more snakes. My friends reminded me that we were too close to go back, which would waste a 6-hour trip. I felt bad about the idea, so we continued on, even though my every living cell in my body wanted to go back. Another half hour later, we stumble on a part of the path that must have been hit by an avalanche or something. Yet the path was still visible. My instincts still screamed to go back, and my friends now wanted to turn back too, so we agreed to do so. The road was just too dangerous to continue on. After half the climb back, one member of our group began to act strange. She wasn't talking. I checked her face, and it was dead pale with red blotches. I ordered a stop for water and poured water on her head. I was afraid she was either overheating or getting a sunstroke, and I didn't want anyone to get hurt because of me. We continued up the road, which strangely seemed a lot shorter this time. though that shouldn't have been possible, and my friend was still unresponsive. The other members of the group told me to leave her be. She could vent her spleen back at the hotel, but I was getting more and more worried. She was moving like a puppet, rigid, weird, absent. I kept pouring water on her head, and about 15 minutes after running out, we finally made it to the car. Without a word, she got in. I thought she was angry with me. I kept apologizing, and she just kept staring ahead. It was starting to get scary. 10 minutes after that, we stopped at a local inn that was run by two kind, elderly people. The man sold us some chips and cola, and we all guzzled that down. However, my friend was still acting in that puppet-like manner. The elderly lady observed us for a while, then called me over. She asks, "Waterfall?" I tried to explain in English. She kept shaking no. "Waterfall, yes?" I finally said yes. She walked over to my friend and looks her straight in the eye. It was a weird moment, really weird. I could tell the gaze was really penetrating. This lasted for about 5 seconds or so, and my friend checks back in. She's asking where the heck we were and how we ended up here. She wanted to know if she missed the waterfall. She had no recollection of the trip whatsoever, and besides being thirsty, she seemed just fine. The elderly lady smiled and walked away, refusing our money, saying, "Needed." Being way too grateful, I left the money at the counter anyway and walked away. Now, I don't think most things in the story can be chalked up to me being scared crapless by a snake and someone getting a heat stroke. However, later that night, I couldn't help but thinking, in mythology, the snake or serpent and the tree are entwined. Serpents, snakes, dragons, and naga often either guard, knowledge, or treasure. The treasure or knowledge is either dangerous or cursed. Most often the snake is the guardian of the secrets of life and death, due to the ability to rejuvenate itself by shedding the skin. If there would be one warning a guy chasing down mythology should catch, especially when trying to reach the world of the dead, it would have been a snake. From the giant snake Ladin, guarding apples that can make a man immortal, to the dragon slain by Siegfried, spreading a curse and dragon gold, and even the apple given to Eve, serpents are jealous of what they guard and what is given. It usually has a catch. This was the one way I would have caught the hint that would send every alarm bell ringing. The scientist in me tells me I had an adrenaline-fueled case of overactive imagination. The rest of me wonders what would have happened if we had instead continued and actually found what I was looking for. Thanks for listening. Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember to stay safe out there because this world is full of strange and terrifying things. If you like and enjoyed these stories, then hit the like button, press the notification bell, and subscribe for more spine-tingling content, and we will see you in the next story.